the Gatsby source plugin for Crownpeak DXM using the React SDK for Crownpeak DXM. Built on top of the React SDK, which if you recall from previous session does two things. It handles communication between the React application and Crownpeak DXM, both for static and for dynamic content, as well as auto-generating the DXM configuration for components, templates, and models in a process that we know as scaffolding. The Gatsby source plugin for Crownpeak DXM builds on top of the React SDK to add a few more capabilities. First of all, if you choose to use Gatsby, it will handle the communication between Gatsby build process and Crownpeak DXM. And that's either for the entire data payload managed in Crownpeak or incremental deltas of that content. It will do this for development or production, continuous integration, and deployment pipelines as well. How does that work? If you think about the React SDK or any of the single page application frameworks that we've built, they take care of the data management and the scaffolding of that process. On the diagram on screen, you see Crownpeak highlighted in pink, which as we know is a SaaS-based digital experience management and content management platform. Content is managed by an author on the left-hand side, creating and editing inside the DXM platform, and that content is published either as static files, for example, JSON, although any technology can be used, either as a static file to the delivery target, the hosting location on the right, or via the DXM API, the dynamic content API, again, the RESTful interface that can be consumed as well. The SDK takes care of all of that. The customer, the development team are building out the configurations, templates, models, components inside their local IDE. And again, we'll show that in the demonstration shortly. And that is being scaffolded against the CMS, cutting down massively on the amount of implementation time typically required under the Crownpeak platform. The Gatsby Cloud architecture extends on that. So what happens from a development perspective is absolutely identical. Slightly different way of working with Gatsby, and we'll get onto that in the demo portion as well. However, the fundamentals are the same. The SDKs, the source plugin component manages the communication between the platform and Crownpeak, as well as providing the scaffolding technologies as well. Where it differs slightly is on the right-hand side of this diagram, or the center right, is you'll see that a developer will check their code changes into GitHub, and then in turn, that will trigger builds of the code that has been deployed inside the Gatsby CI/CD pipeline. As content authors on the left-hand side create that content, then that will additionally trigger builds of the Gatsby platform as well, meaning that your developers can take care of the code and configuration and empowering your marketers to completely manage the content in isolation. Okay, so today we're going to build the standard ProCam site using the Gatsby source plugin that we've now created. We've released that up on the Crownpeak GitHub site, and as you can see, this is a publicly available repo. There's a README at the front of the repository that shows you how you can use that, how you get started, the configuration options that you have. Also, to make our lives a little bit easier, we have gone and created a Gatsby starter. And so this allows you to very quickly create a configuration of everything you need in order to use both the Crownpeak React SDK as well as the Gatsby starter to get going. And again, you'll see here we have a simple way to clone that. What we have inside the CMS here is an empty folder that I just called Gatsby. This is running on one of our instances. And if I open a terminal and navigate into a suitable location on my machine, we can go back into the Gatsby starter, we can copy the start URL, and we can paste that content in and hit enter. Now this takes a little bit of time. I've sped this up for the purpose of the video, but it pulls down all of the starting files that I need. It pulls down all of the node packages and gets that running on my machine. As if we look in here we have the files. If I open up WebStorm, my IDE of choice, then again, inside here, I can see that the node modules have been correctly installed. I have my environment file that if you remember from our React SDK demo sessions, that's how we configure. And of course, I've built some example components and example pages that we are ready to work with from an integration perspective. Okay, so First things first, when I get into this application, I need to go and initialize a project inside the Crownpeak CMS, inside DXM. So I can use the React SDK to do an initialization. I give it the top folder, so the Gatsby folder that I showed you earlier in the CMS, and I give that project a name, and we'll call it Procam Gatsby. And again, what this is doing right now is both installing and patching the project that we've created inside the CMS. That's now done. And again, I've sped that sequence up. And again, what I can do now is I can go and verify that that scaffolding and that patching of that process has taken place correctly. All good. And if I refresh inside the CMS, what I suddenly have now is a site that's been configured. Now, the existing assets and the site config folder, they're just things that get deployed by the Crownpeak component library. I don't need those, so I'm just going to go and delete them. And again, that's all I need to do to get going. So now with this starter site, what I need to do is start thinking about the content that I'm going to deploy. Now, the HTML.js that lives inside the source folder of a Gatsby site, that really refers to the header and the footer of the page. And so I'm going to paste in there some that I've built previously that refers to style sheets, JavaScript, all of that stuff as well. And I'm quickly going to copy in the assets into the file structure so that I have access locally to CSS, images, icons, JavaScript, and the like. So that's now fully in place. Next thing I'm going to do is go and have a look at building out some templates that we need to work with. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this example page and I'm going to rename that as unstructured page. What I want to do in this unstructured page is just have a single drop zone in the middle of the page. And the idea being I can create lots and lots of pages from it. So if you see here, we've got the class or the asset named unstructured page. There's a GraphQL query at the bottom. We're just going to delete that for now. And I'll come back to how we work with that a little bit later on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in here the code that I want for our unstructured page. Here we have it. I have a header, I have a footer component, and I have a main section in the middle that just contains a drop zone. Now clearly what I don't have right now is the header itself, and so I need to go and add that header into the experience, and I'll need to do the same with the footer and any other components that it needs. So I'm going to create a folder. That folder I'm simply going to call global, and inside that I'm going to go and create a new component. Actually, I'm going to copy this example one. I've already got it, so why not? We'll go and paste that in there, and I'm going to call that header.js. Again, pretty standard example here with just a simple text field, but what I'm going to do is go and paste the content that I have from a previous time I've built this. And again, you can see there's nothing complex going on in here. What we're doing really is creating a header component. And here we can see that we have the helmet. Now, React helmet is a way of injecting content into the head or the footer of the page. And there's a navigation component here called header navigation that I need to create. And so I'm going to create a new component called that. And I'm going to again paste in the content that I've got previously. Here we can see header navigation. It has some of the Crownpeak scaffolding components that we talked about in the previous React demo. Again, refer back to that if you need to know how those work. Now, header navigation resolves. We've dealt with that. I don't need to worry about the header component anymore. That has been done. So the next thing that I need to do now is go and look at building out the footer. Once I've done that, then I'm going to have a page that works. And again, get the content from a snippet library that I have. And again, now the footer content is in place with the links at the bottom. Now let's get the imports back onto our unstructured page.js so that we can refer to those. And once that's done, then I have a fully wired up page with header, footer component, and navigation component, as well as the HTML.js that contains all of the wrapping stuff, the overall global header, global footer, CSS, JavaScript, etc. So that's now done. Note my drop zone. Now, of course, in order to use a drop zone, I have to go and create some components that I can put inside the drop zone. But before I do that, let's go and build the index HTML. So this is going to be the page that runs on the top of our website. Here we see again header, footer, drop zone. But there are 4 or 5 components that we haven't yet built, and we're going to need to do that in order to work with it. We'll handle the CMS asset ID a little bit later. Here we see home hero, image panel, events, products, and the drop zone we already have. Again, we have a GraphQL query at the bottom of the page. We'll take that out for now. and we'll go and start building the first component that we need, that will be home hero. To do that, I'm going to copy my example component. I'm going to create a new folder here, and again, I'm going to call those draggable. That's going to give me the ability to paste those components in there. So we now got a load of draggable components. Let's go and create home hero. And again, let's paste the code that I have from a previous example. Again, you should be familiar with this standard React SDK stuff, mapping the fields to the local properties and decorating those in the output from the page. So that's the home hero taken care of. Next thing we need to go and look at is the image panel. The image panel has 3 images in it. So again, I'll create a new component, call it the image panel. And again, I will paste in the code that I have. Notice here we have an image panel list item. So again, because there are, or an image panel item rather, because there are multiple components, I need to create a sub one. I'm going to put that in a folder called raw. Copy that example component again, and into that I'm going to go and paste the example of code I have previously. Pretty simple, 2 fields, image and alt. And of course, as we can see, this is the image panel. These are the 3 images that are repeated. This is the component that will get repeated. And if we look down this page, we see here the Crownpeak list components. So that's those all done now. Now, as you can see, I've now gone and created all of the other components. So the events, the products, all of the others that I needed. So I just saved you having to watch me do that. One more page I'm going to create, which is the 404 page. Again, I've got to create a new page and paste that code in. Remove the GraphQL query from the bottom of the page. That will now allow me to have all of those built. Next thing is to scaffold this. I'm going to do a dry run first of all, and that dry run will allow me to understand all of the components, pages, and wrappers that are going to be automatically created inside Crownpeak DXM based on the work that we've done so far. Sped this sequence up, we're now scaffolding against the Crownpeak CMS, and that's automatically generating all of those code pieces based on the Gatsby and React code. And if I go into the CMS, I can now see that all of those components have been created. The navigation components, the panel items, the home hero, and the like. And if I look at my templates, I now have my home page, my not found page, and my unstructured page template as well. Now, we don't want you to have to watch me go and populate all of that content, so I've just switched to a project where I have it. Again, this structure is identical, but here you can see I've populated a home page. And again, that allows me to edit content on the glass by switching into inline mode, and I can type anything, hello world for argument's sake. I can also open my content blocks panel, and I can drag into a drop zone. If you remember, we put at the bottom of the page, I can drag and drop any of those components into place. And of course, as I do, I can now click in them. And again, I can alter that content on the glass as well. So a lot of flexibility around the experiences. But in order to be able to use this stuff inside Gatsby, do you remember we removed those GraphQL queries? I'm going to need to go and publish that content. So I've just saved. And as I publish, I now have access to all of this content through the Crownpeak Dynamic Content API. And again, if you're familiar with the React SDKs, Angular or Vue, you'll be very familiar with that interface. Now, the next thing I need to do inside my development environment is to start the Gatsby project. Again, I've sped up this process so that you can see the results quicker. What it's done is it's called out to the Crownpeak Dynamic Content API, and it's tried to build all of the content based on the configuration that we've got. But you'll see we've got a load of errors. And we've got a load of errors because Gatsby doesn't know what an unstructured page is. It doesn't know what the home page is and the like. And so we start to get these errors on page right now. And so one of the things that we have to do is go and put the data back on the page. Gatsby gives us a very good GraphQL editor. And that will go and iterate through the Dynamic Content API. This is what the source plugin is there to do. And it will allow me to look at things like the home page, the events page, and pick out all of the fields that I want to show on a particular page. So if I go and paste in a standard set of GraphQL that we've built previously for the home page to pull in all the data for the events, the home hero, the image panel, and the products, pull that into the GraphQL editor, and again, I can be clear and sure that the configuration is what I want. Once I have that, I can reopen my index.js and I can go and paste that on the bottom. Here we go. We've created a constant called query. and it is that the page will reference. You see here I have some asset IDs baked. That's because we always know the asset ID of the home page and the admin page, which contains the header navigation. I need to do the same thing inside my 404 page. So I need to paste into there the GraphQL query that I have. In this case, I'm going to go and get a list of all of the pages because I don't know which page I wanted because I'm on a 404. So go and return them all and allow the user to paginate through them. We might be a little bit more restrictive in real life. And finally, on an unstructured page, I want a similar query. Go and get me all of the drop zones. If you remember, that's all there is. But make the ID dynamic based on the routing to that page that we bring. So once that's done, we can go back into the terminal. And inside the terminal, there are the errors we got before. We can run another yarn start. And again, that will go through the Gatsby building process. It will create a static version of that site. And then flipping into a web browser, I now have the ability to browse it. All the content is there as you would expect. Now that was in development version. What Gatsby also allows you to do is run a production version, a build. So by running a Gatsby build and Gatsby serve, that is generating the static content that is going to be used, a representation, if you like, of what will be deployed to the production environment. So we'll just give that a second to finish. And again, if I go and look inside the public folder, inside my application, we'll be able to see the files that are being generated by the Gatsby process. Lots of flat static HTML and JavaScript files here. And if I browse now to localhost on 9000, I now have a production version of that site. Now, one of the things that Gatsby gives us is a really good way to integrate with continuous integration and deployment using Gatsby Cloud. I log into gatsbyjs.org. Again, I use my GitHub credentials, and here I have a site configured. In this case, I have the ability to tie this to a GitHub repository, which is where I have our ProCam version hooked out. I'm able to provide environment variables for both build and preview time, as well as deploying hosting to any configuration I want. In this case, I've chosen to deploy out to Amazon S3. I then use CloudFront and Lambda in front of it to serve this content publicly. I have the ability to trigger builds and view existing builds. Each time I make a change to source control, I will create a new build. And again, that build process you saw us doing earlier is done by the Gatsby system. Here I can trigger one manually. And again, I can see that that is running right now. It's queued, now it's building. And again, I can click on that to view the progress of the build. And again, that's done everything that the build process did inside my local dev environment. And again, it can take an amount of time. It depends on how much is going on, sometimes a minute. In that case, I've sped it up to 1 minute 37. And this is actually publishing 16,000 pages that we created. And if I refresh that content, that build is complete. And again, I can see that content up on my live website, this gatsby.procam.cprd.io. Now, I talked earlier about the 404 page. If you remember, we said that we wanted a list of all the unstructured pages. I created, in this case, 16,000 of them. And again, they have now been fully iterated. 16,000 manual index HTML files have been created. Static content has been done. Now, as I go back and look at Gatsby, again, I can see that that build was triggered manually. But what if I want to go and work inside the CMS? What if I make a change to content? Again, what we've done is we've built out a Gatsby configuration inside the Crownpeak CSM. And this allows us to have both webhooks for live and preview states, which will tell the Gatsby platform to do its work. So if I now go and publish those, again, we can see the publishing monitor is working right now. That content's getting deployed. There we go. A post-publish hook has been created to go and trigger the Gatsby build service itself. So I can now see that this has been building. And if I click into that build, we can see that a similar build has happened to when I manually triggered, except this was triggered by the webhook. Now, a couple of things that this will do. This will take incremental changes. So if we update lots of content, we need to deploy lots of content. If we only update single page, then single page content will typically get deployed. And again, we can now see that that's been built, 56 seconds, I sped that up. It's getting deployed out to Amazon S3, if you recall. That's where that content's getting deployed. It's running a set of Lighthouse tests, performance tests at the same time as well. Content has now been deployed. And if I go back to the web browser, open up my developer tools so that I can clear my cache, there's some pretty hot caching rules around here. Empty cache and hard reload. Now I can see that as that page is refreshed, I now have the Hello World content we published through the CMS. And I also have the product banner that we deployed on the foot of the page. So that is how you build continuous integration using Gatsby Cloud and the Crownpeak Gatsby Source plugin. So in summary, the React SDK for Crownpeak DXM handling the communication between the React app and the Crownpeak DXM platform, dynamic or static data, and also generating that DXM configuration for components, templates, models, the process that we call scaffolding. The extension to that, the Gatsby Source plugin for Crownpeak DXM, handling the communication between the Gatsby build process and Crownpeak DXM platform, and that's the entire payload or incremental deltas of content, whether it be in development or in the production CI/CD pipelines. The links at the bottom of the screen right now will give you access directly to the repositories. All the code there is open source under the MIT license. It is maintained by Crownpeak as well. So give it a go. Open it up, use the Gatsby starter site, and play away. Good luck.